Look at your nose for a second, not to judge it, to understand it. Because if it's wide, if it spreads a little further than you'd expect, if it takes up space on your face in a way that feels almost ancient, there's a reason for that. And that reason was buried in your DNA for roughly 40,000 years, waiting for science to catch up. In 2023, a team of researchers from University College London published a landmark study in the journal Communications Biology. They analyzed the genetic data of over 6,000 people and found something that stopped the scientific community in its tracks. A specific gene, inherited directly from Neanderthals, influences the shape of the human nose today. Not metaphorically, not distantly, directly, measurably, right now in living people. That gene is called ATF3, and if you have a wide or prominent nose, there is a real scientific possibility that you are carrying a piece of Neanderthal biology on the center of your face. This isn't mythology, this isn't ancestry folklore, this is peer-reviewed genetics. And what it reveals about who we are, where we came from, and what our bodies are still carrying is more surprising than most people ever imagined. For most of human history, we assumed our faces were entirely our own, shaped by our parents, our grandparents, maybe a great-grandmother, with strong features. The idea that something older, something prehistoric, was quietly sculpting our bone structure from the inside out never seriously entered the conversation. Then genetics arrived, and everything changed. In May 2023, University College London released the results of one of the most detailed genome-wide association studies ever conducted on human facial features. The researchers recruited over 6,000 volunteers from Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. People of mixed European, Native American, and African ancestry. They photographed each participant's face, mapped 106 precise landmarks across the eyes, nose, mouth, temples, and chin, and then cross-referenced those measurements against each person's full genetic data. What they were looking for were patterns, specific regions of the human genome that consistently correlated with specific facial features. They found 33 of them. 33 distinct genome regions tied directly to the shape of the human face. 26 of those were replicated across separate datasets from East Asia, Europe, and Africa, confirming they weren't a fluke of one population. But one region stood apart from all the others. One region didn't just link to facial structure in modern humans, it traced directly back to a species that vanished from the Earth 40,000 years ago. The researchers knew immediately they were looking at something extraordinary. They were looking at Neanderthal DNA, still shaping faces in the 21st century. So what exactly is this gene, and what does it actually do? That is where the story gets personal. The gene region is called ATF3, short for Activating Transcription Factor 3. It sits in a specific location on the human genome, in a region designated 1q32-3, and its primary job in the body involves nervous tissue regeneration. That is what scientists thought it did. What they did not fully appreciate until this study was that ATF3 is also regulated by another gene, one directly involved in shaping the midface during development. Which means while your body was forming, while the bones of your nose were being laid down in the womb, ATF3 was in the room, influencing the outcome. The UCL researchers found that participants with Native American ancestry and separately, participants with East Asian ancestry from a different dataset carried a version of ATF3 that had been inherited from Neanderthals. Not a similar version, not a parallel evolution. The same genetic material passed down through interbreeding, surviving intact across tens of thousands of years. And in the people carrying it, that gene contributed to increased nasal height, a taller, more prominent, broader nose. What makes this finding even more striking is that in participants of European descent, this Neanderthal version of ATF3 was essentially absent. Different populations, different inheritance patterns, different noses. The gene does not lie. It remembers exactly where it came from, and it carries that memory on your face every single day. Before a gene can be inherited, there has to be a meeting. And the meeting between modern humans and Neanderthals is one of the most consequential encounters in the entire history of our species, even if nobody wrote it down. Here is what the science now tells us. Neanderthals evolved outside of Africa roughly 400,000 years ago, spreading across Europe and Western Asia. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, remained in Africa until much later. Then, Somewhere around 50,000 years ago, a population of our ancestors made the journey north, out of the African continent into Eurasia. And there, in the valleys and forests of a world that looked nothing like the one we inhabit today, they encountered Neanderthals. They did not simply pass each other by. Two studies published in late 2024, one in Nature and one in Science, independently confirmed that the interbreeding between our ancestors and Neanderthals occurred during a sustained period, beginning approximately 47,000 years ago and lasting for roughly 7,000 years. 7,000 years of contact. 7,000 years of shared lives, shared territory, and shared DNA. The result of that ancient relationship is measurable today. Non-African people carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes, according to the Smithsonian Institution's Human Origins Program. That number sounds small, but inside that 1 to 4% lives ATF3. Inside that 1 to 4% lives the shape of your nose. Small percentage, enormous legacy. Now here is the question that scientists spent decades arguing about. If Neanderthals were cold-adapted, built for Ice Age Europe, with stocky bodies, heavy brows, and thick bones engineered for survival in brutal temperatures, why did they have such wide nasal openings? Narrower nasal passages are typically better in cold climates. They warm and humidify air more efficiently before it reaches the lungs. A wide nose, by contrast, is classically associated with warmer, more humid environments. The Neanderthal nose looked like a paradox carved in bone. For a long time, nobody could fully explain it. Then the research caught up. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences used computational fluid dynamics, the same technology used to design aircraft engines, to reconstruct and simulate how air actually moved through a Neanderthal nasal cavity. What they found dismantled the paradox entirely. Despite the wide external opening, the internal nasal anatomy of Neanderthals was remarkably efficient at warming and humidifying cold air before it reached the lungs. The shape worked just differently than anyone had assumed. More recent research, including endoscopic examination of a remarkably preserved Neanderthal skull, confirmed that the internal nasal cavity closely resembles that of modern humans. The Neanderthal nose was not a flaw in the design. It was a different solution to the same problem: cold, dry air, and it worked. It worked so well that natural selection held onto it. And through interbreeding, it eventually found its way onto your face. Here is something that separates this discovery from a simple genetic curiosity. ATF3 did not survive 40,000 years by accident. Genes that offer no advantage get diluted across generations, slowly fading from a population until they disappear entirely. That is how evolution works. Useful traits persist. Neutral ones drift. Harmful ones get selected out. ATF3 persisted. The UCL researchers specifically examined the ATF3 gene region for signs of natural selection biological fingerprints that indicate a gene was actively favored because it helped carriers survive and reproduce. They found them. The gene region showed clear evidence that it conferred an advantage. It was not just passed down passively. It was held onto deliberately, generation after generation, because the people who carried it fared better than those who did not. The most likely explanation connects directly back to climate. When modern humans left Africa and moved into Eurasia roughly 47,000 years ago, they entered environments their bodies were not originally built for: colder, darker, with lower levels of ultraviolet radiation, and entirely different pathogen landscapes. Neanderthals had already spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to exactly those conditions. Inheriting Neanderthal traits in that environment was not a quirk. It was an upgrade. A wider, more prominent nasal structure, shaped by ATF3, may have offered real respiratory advantages in cold Eurasian climates, helping warm incoming air, improving performance in freezing temperatures. The people who carried that gene were better equipped, and so they survived. And so the gene is still here, and so, possibly, is your nose. The nose is the most visible sign, but it is not the only one. Because when your ancestors interbred with Neanderthals 47,000 years ago, they did not cherry-pick individual genes. They inherited entire segments of ancient DNA, and inside those segments came a whole package of traits that are still showing up in modern humans today. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology analyzed the genomes of over 112,000 participants in the UK Biobank, one of the largest genetic databases in the world. cross-referencing Neanderthal DNA segments with measurable physical and biological traits. What they found was remarkable. Neanderthal gene variants were contributing to skin tone, hair color, sleep patterns, and mood in present-day Europeans, not marginally. Detectably, consistently, across an enormous sample. The immune system tells an equally striking story. Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years fighting pathogens specific to Eurasia, bacteria, viruses, and parasites that modern humans arriving from Africa had never encountered. Their immune systems had evolved precise responses to those threats. When interbreeding occurred, some of those immune adaptations transferred directly into the modern human genome. Toll-like receptors, proteins that sit on the surface of cells and serve as the body's first line of defense against invading microbes, carry Neanderthal variants in many people today, giving their immune systems a faster, sharper response to certain infections. Your nose, your skin, your immune system. The Neanderthal inheritance runs deeper than most people ever realize. But here is the part nobody talks about at the dinner table. Because the Neanderthal inheritance is not purely a gift. Some of those ancient genes, brilliant as they were in Ice Age Eurasia, are causing real problems in the modern world. And if you have ever wondered why your immune system seems to work against you rather than for you, your Neanderthal DNA may be part of the answer. Take the immune boost we discussed in the last section. Those same toll-like receptor variants that sharpen the body's response to pathogens can also tip the immune system into overdrive. Research has linked Neanderthal gene variants to a higher risk of allergic diseases, conditions where the immune system reacts aggressively to substances that pose no real threat. The same ancient wiring that once protected our ancestors from Eurasian infections is, in certain modern environments, triggering responses that were never meant to fire. The autoimmune picture is equally complicated. Neanderthal DNA has been associated with elevated risk for rheumatoid arthritis, Graves' disease, and a condition sometimes called Viking disease, in which fingers progressively bend and lock. These are not rare or obscure conditions. They affect millions of people worldwide. And then there is COVID-19. A specific Neanderthal gene variant located on chromosome 3 has been shown to roughly double the risk of severe illness from the virus. That variant is carried by approximately half of all South Asians, and 1 in 6 Europeans alive today. Ancient solutions, modern consequences. The same DNA, the price of inheritance. If Neanderthal DNA is in your ancestry, and for a lot of you watching it, is head over to the OriginDNA website. I have a 3-volume PDF guide bundle that shows you exactly how to read your raw data and maximize your ancestry or 2, 3, and me results. Link is in the description. But don't go yet, the last part of this video is the most important. So who actually has this Neanderthal nose gene? Who is walking around today with ATF3 quietly influencing the structure of their face? The answer is more widespread and more nuanced than the headlines suggest. The UCL study found the strongest signal in people with Native American ancestry. Across the 6,000 participants from Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, those with Native American heritage were the most consistent carriers of the Neanderthal version of ATF3. A separate dataset confirmed the same pattern in people with East Asian ancestry. 2 geographically distant populations, both carrying the same ancient gene, both showing the same nasal trait, a finding that speaks to just how far that original interbreeding event rippled across human history. For people of European descent, the picture is different. The Neanderthal version of ATF3 is essentially absent in European populations, despite Europeans carrying Neanderthal DNA in other regions of their genome. Different segments of the ancient genome survived in different populations, shaped by the specific environments and selective pressures each group faced after the interbreeding event. And what about people of African descent? For decades, scientists assumed African populations carried no Neanderthal DNA at all, since the interbreeding occurred outside Africa. A landmark 2020 study published in the journal Cell overturned that assumption, finding that people with African ancestry carry approximately 0.5% Neanderthal DNA, likely the result of ancient back migration into the continent. The Neanderthal legacy does not belong to one group. It belongs, in different ways and different amounts, to all of us. Here is something that surprises almost everyone who has ever spit into a tube and mailed it to a lab. Your ancestry result, or your 23andMe report, will give you a Neanderthal percentage. It might say 2%. It might say slightly more or slightly less. It will probably tell you which specific traits your Neanderthal DNA is linked to, things like back hair, or a heightened sensitivity to certain smells. What it will almost certainly not tell you is whether you carry ATF3, whether the specific gene that shapes nasal width and height came from a Neanderthal ancestor. Whether your nose, the one you have looked at in mirrors your entire life, is carrying 47,000-year-old genetic information. That is not because the companies are hiding anything. It is because consumer DNA tests are built around a curated set of well-studied markers, variants, that appear in large, well-documented reference databases. ATF3, as identified by the UCL study, is a research-grade finding. It has not yet been folded into the standard panels that consumer testing companies run. The raw data exists in your results. The interpretation does not. This is exactly why geneticists emphasize the difference between what a DNA report tells you and what your raw data actually contains. The report is a summary. The raw data is the full text. And buried inside that full text, for a significant portion of people with Native American or East Asian ancestry, is a Neanderthal gene variant that no algorithm has yet flagged, sitting quietly in a genome region called 1q32.3, still doing exactly what it has always done. Neanderthals disappeared from the fossil record approximately 40,000 years ago. The last of them vanished from northwestern Europe, somewhere between 40,000 and 44,000 years before the present, according to updated radiocarbon dating research published in recent years. Their tools stopped appearing in the archaeological record. Their bones stopped accumulating in the caves. By any conventional measure, they were gone. Except they were not. Not entirely. Not really. Because extinction, when it comes to Neanderthals, is a more complicated word than it first appears. Their phenotype disappeared. Their distinct physical form, the heavy brow, the barrel chest, the abbreviated limbs built for cold endurance faded from the earth. But their genome did not. It was absorbed. It was carried forward inside the bodies of the modern humans they had lived alongside, interbred with, and ultimately outlasted only in the narrowest biological sense. Scientists at University College London put it plainly. 99.7% of Neanderthal and modern human DNA is identical. We are not looking at a distant relative across an unbridgeable evolutionary gap. We are looking at a population so genetically close to us that their DNA slipped into ours almost seamlessly and has been replicating inside human cells ever since. Every person alive today with a wide nose, a prominent nasal bridge, or a broader facial structure shaped by ATF3 is carrying something that predates civilization, predates agriculture, predates written language by tens of thousands of years. The Neanderthal never fully left. They are still here, looking back at you every time you glance in the mirror. So the next time someone makes a comment about your nose, the width of it, the boldness of it, the way it anchors your face, you can smile, because you now know something most people do not. That nose is not an accident. It is not simply a family trait passed down from a grandparent or a distant cousin. It is a biological document. A 47,000-year-old piece of evidence that your ancestors met Neanderthals, lived alongside them, and carried a piece of them forward through every single generation that followed. Science has spent decades slowly assembling this picture, sequencing ancient genomes, mapping modern faces, tracing gene variants across 6,000 volunteers in 5 countries. And what it keeps finding is the same extraordinary truth. We are not separate from our prehistoric past. We are made of it. It is in our immune systems, our skin, our sleep patterns, and yes, right there in the center of our faces. The Neanderthal story did not end 40,000 years ago. It continued quietly, invisibly, written into DNA all the way to you. If this changed the way you see yourself, share it with someone whose nose tells the same story. And if you want to go deeper into your own bloodline, the link is in the description.
Thanks for watching this video. Before you go, your raw DNA data has hidden stories waiting to be unlocked. Tap the link in the description to download your ebook copy and find out what they are.